Bungie just added yet another fantastic 140 RPM hand cannon into Destiny 2, the Cantata 57. This archetype is considered to be the best in the game by many top players. I imagine you clicked on this video because you want to know how good this hand cannon is, especially compared to some of the other top options. Many of my fellow YouTubers have been hyping this thing up quite a bit, but does this hand cannon really live up to the expectations? Well, after using two versions of the God Roll for a while and comparing it with the Palindrome, I think I've made up my mind. So let's dig into it. Does this new entry compete with the king of energy hand cannons? If you didn't know already, the Palindrome comes as a Nightfall exclusive reward whenever it's in the rotation. If you do the Grandmaster Nightfall, you'll get the Adept version, which is able to slot Adept mods. In contrast to this, the Cantata is just a random world drop. Now, I normally don't buy into the whole streamer loot joke, but in this case, I got exceptionally lucky. Within the first day of Witch Queen, my account was graced with basically both of the ideal perk combinations that I was most interested in trying, and both of these came alongside some great stat setups. One of them is Oozing with range, and the other one was Stability. The base stats of the Cantata are actually really good. If you take note that it gets both accurized rounds and steady rounds in the second column, you can opt to maximize either the range or the stability. As primarily a mouse and keyboard player, I do personally prefer the range, but for my controller friends out there, that extra stability can be really helpful to manage the recoil. Also, this gun comes fixed with a fast draw sight aesthetic, and it has the choice of barrel options. I think this is actually a really good thing because barrels generally give you higher stat boosts compared to scopes. And the fast draw sight has always been one of my favorites. It's so clean and makes picking up your targets visually so easy. To address the elephant in the room, yes, you can get a higher overall range stat than the non-adept Palindrome on the Cantata. This makes it very desirable. Unfortunately for the Cantata though, the adept Palindrome gets adept mods which will boost its overall stats a bit higher. Also, you won't have the luxury of ricochet rounds on the Cantata, meaning that it's going to be generally less stable than a Palindrome with a similar role. This is the point where the perks come to the rescue, so let's run through them. Considering there's some new perks that can potentially roll on the Cantata, I'm going to start with them first. In the fourth column, Focus Fury gives you a damage boost for laying the top half of your magazine as headshots. Basically, the question you have to ask yourself is whether you value that 10-second duration of Focus Fury enough to want to pay for it with 5 consecutive headshots. Sure, against players who don't pose much of a challenge, this isn't impossible, but when you're playing against enemies who are at or above your skill level who move really well, this is going to be a tall order. On the good side though, you're not pressured to land those headshots quickly. As long as you don't swap weapons, your progress is not going away. In general for the Crucible, I'd say Focus Fury doesn't really sound like a good deal, but I can still imagine some situations where it could be useful. In this way, the perk almost feels like a legendary version of what Hawkmoon brings to the table, except the damage is split across the whole bottom of the magazine instead of into just one bullet. This can get really nasty against more passive players who are abusing healing or overshield abilities, but I guess time will tell how valuable this perk will be. Swinging over to the third column, Compulsive Reloader gives you more reload speed close to the top of your magazine. It's kind of funny to me that this perk makes fun of players who reload the second they use one bullet. Still, I don't really think it's all that good, especially when we have more powerful options in the same column. I will point out though that it does synergize really nicely with the Suros Origin trait, which we'll cover in a second. Finally, Steady Hand will essentially give you the Dragon Shadow's handling boost to all of your weapons after you get a kill. While that handling boost does sound really nice, consider that you need to get a full kill to activate the perk. I don't really think that generally speaking handling is an adequate reward for getting a kill, especially since you're sacrificing potentially better perks out there. So that covers it for the new perks, but many of the older perks on the table are actually better options in my mind. Don't underestimate Hipfire Grip. It recently got buffed and is feeling better than ever. Unfortunately, I don't have a Cantata with Hipfire Grip to test directly, but I did pull the Pribina D from collections and it's really consistent feeling with Hipfire now. Sure, it's no Dead Man's Tale, but it's much better than before. I was kind of blown away at the range I could land a 3-tap with just Hipfire headshots. Heating Up is also a really nice choice as hand cannons desperately need that accuracy boost to continue reliably landing shots after killing someone. The final two choices, Eye of the Storm and Rapid Hit, both directly help you land more shots in a duel. Rapid Hit gives you more stability and reload speed for landing headshots, and Eye of the Storm gives you that much needed accuracy just for taking damage in a duel. Eye of the Storm in particular has been considered an S tier perk in general for PvP among many top players. It first grew to popularity back on the Austringer during the Menagerie days, which is actually one of my favorite hand cannons of all time in Destiny 2. What's so cool about the Cantata is that it can roll Eye of the Storm with both of the most desirable setups from the Austringer, Opening Shot and Rangefinder. Speaking of the fourth column, basically all the perks here are valid choices. Personally, I love Rangefinder to max out the range, and I think it's probably the best overall option, but I do also see merit in almost all the other choices as well. Vorpal Weapon is a pretty rare perk on hand cannons, and it can come in clutch to melt a roaming super chasing you. I can see a lot of wisdom in keeping a Vorpal Weapon variant to switch over to during the later rounds of Trials of Osiris when all those roaming supers start to come out. Moving target is helpful for extra aim assist and faster strafing speeds while you're aiming down sights. Opening shot is great for a crazy boost to range, accuracy, and magnetism on the first shot of your attack. If you're not going with Rangefinder, I think opening shot is often seen as the next best thing, especially for players who struggle to aim with that extra zoom factor from Rangefinder, or maybe they just don't like it. Finally, time payload is really good at flinching your opponent, and it reduces the damage drop off too. I'm not personally a huge fan of time payload, and I much prefer explosive payload when it's available. This is because the final damage tick on a 3-tap with time payload is slightly delayed, and it can make it feel like my shots aren't hitting. But if you can get used to it, the extra flinch provided from the second damage hit is so incredibly frustrating to play against. I'm happy to say that if you get the masterwork, the barrel, and the magazine that you want, it's very likely that the third and fourth column are going to have something usable. If you get the actual max range roll, you're going to be hitting max damage close to 35 meters away, which is extremely good for a 140 RPM hand cannon. And if you have Eye of the Storm, Rapid Hit, or Hipfire Grip, you're going to have a very versatile and consistent hand cannon that can help you win your duels. Then there's also the Suros Synergy Origin Trait perk. This comes automatically on the gun since it's from the Suros Foundry, and it will give you some extra handling and mitigation to incoming flinch for a short while after you reload. That effect can even be improved this season by using the Psionic Forging mod from the seasonal artifact. So is this perk worth playing for? Well, I recorded myself getting flinch with the perk inactive, active, and buffed with the helmet mod, and here's the results. It's definitely noticeable, but I guess it's hard to say whether this will truly help you win your duels that you otherwise might have lost. I imagine the perk will be great when paired with Eye of the Storm when you're getting that extra accuracy from taking damage during the fight. At the same time though, to get the buffed up version, you're potentially giving up a helmet mod slot. Instead here, you might want to run a hand cannon, shotgun, or sniper targeting mod. So I'm not really sure yet if it's worth that much investment. To answer the burning question, is the Cantata better than the Palindrome? Well, that depends. Here's my high range roll compared to my adept Palindrome. You can see immediately that the Palindrome has about the same amount of range, but much more stability. This makes it feel way better and it performs much more consistently. This is mostly due to the lack of ricochet rounds in the magazine slot. Also, the Palindrome's base stability is higher to begin with. Actually, the Palindrome's stability is about the same as the Cantata's with rapid hits stacked up 5 times. It's just not even close. I used to not care too much about stability on hand cannons. I was firmly on team max range only. But over time, I've come to appreciate how much the extra stability really helps you out on a nicely rolled hand cannon. In addition to the reduction in recoil, which obviously makes getting on target faster and easier, higher stability also reduces the bullet bloom effect by resetting the accuracy cone faster. When you're spamming away shots at your opponent, one extra hit from the faster cone reset might help you win that gunfight. The last thing I want to note here is that the new versions of the Palindrome will get the Vanguard's Vindication Origin trait. This is going to give you a tiny health bump on kill. While we don't have access to the new Palindrome with the Origin traits yet, we did test it out on the Duty Bound, and you can see definitely a tiny little health bump. Is this enough to save your life? Well, that's hard to say. Health is always appreciated, but with such a tiny bump, I think you'll barely even notice it. Just like the Suros perk on the Cantata, the value of this one is really hard to assess. Nonetheless, I think you'll see where I'm going with this one. The Adept Palindrome just slightly edges out the Cantata on paper because of the superior stat potential. In general, I think the real comparison boils down to the perks. When it comes down to the wire, it's safe to say that most of us would probably want Rangefinder for the extra range bump, or Opening Shot if you're not really a fan of that extra zoom. So do you value Overflow or Killing Wind from the Palindrome more than Hipfire Grip, Rapid Hit, or my personal favorite Eye of the Storm? Well, after using both of these for a while, I think I still prefer my Palindrome a little bit. It's just so crispy and so smooth, and the Cantata feels just a bit jarring after using the Palindrome. I feel like with the Cantata, I have to choose to either give up a little bit of range or stability in order to get Eye of the Storm. And although I do find that to be an awesome perk for winning duels, I'm not really sure if I'm ready to make that trade yet. Maybe with more testing I'll change my mind, but for now I'm slightly giving my personal pick over to the Palindrome. But that doesn't mean I won't be keeping any Cantata rolls either. On the contrary, there are a lot of unique things that the Cantata can do that the Palindrome can't. Vorpal Weapon is one of these. If you don't want to throw on a Vorpal DMT to fight against supers and trials, that extra swappable damage will be a game changer. Focus Fury can also be situationally quite useful, and Time Payload, if you don't mind the wonkiness, is definitely a contender for that extra flinch. And most importantly, the Arc Element can be both a blessing and a curse. If you're playing against a Risk Runner, you definitely want to avoid using the Cantata. On the flip side, if the enemy just pulled out an Heir Apparent, you'd really want that arc damage to chip down the bulky shield. If you're a new or returning player and you're deciding which of these hand cannons to go for, I'd say the Cantata is much easier to acquire since it's simply a world drop. I got both of my rolls while just playing the game normally, whereas the Palindrome requires farming the Nightfall for a drop. And if you want the Adept Palindrome, that means you need to farm Grandmaster Nightfalls. These are fun activities, but realistically, the combination of an easy strike to grind as well as finding a weak that's dropping the Palindrome can make acquiring a good roll quite a battle. I doubt I'll even bother farming a new one for the trait perk because of how tough it was to get the roll that I'm currently using. And of course, we have a lot of other great hand cannon options these days if you're not having much luck getting either of these guns to drop with a nice roll. You can go for the Fatebringer from the Vault of Glass, which is arguably still the best legendary hand cannon in Destiny 2. The IS Luna drops from the Grasp of Avarice dungeon and is very easy to farm with a group on the final boss. This thing can get some excellent rolls and it's an amazing hand cannon overall. The new Crisis Inverted hand cannon from the Crucible playlist has some really nice rolls as well, and the Amalon trait buffs your reload speed and stability for the top of the magazine. And the Dire Promise and Waking Vigil both got their stats recently buffed overall while losing just a bit of aim assist to bring them more in line with the other 140s. So you can see that we have quite a few good options on the table right now. It's a great time to be a hand cannon enthusiast in Destiny. If you found this helpful and you haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting the sub button so you don't miss my next breakdown video. And if you want to see another one, I'd recommend my video comparing the Hawkmoon to the Thorn. It's the video on the top right of your screen and also linked in the description.